So, specializing in portal and collaboration solutions, our next speaker is the technology architect at the Microsoft Technology Center here in Reston, Virginia. At the MTC, he meets daily with both commercial and public sector customers to discuss business requirements and map them to the Microsoft platform. He helps customers understand product features, best practices, and necessary customizations for them to realize SharePoint's full potential. So here to discuss that potential and to provide a glimpse at SharePoint 2013, please welcome Microsoft's Ed Hild.
Thanks. Yep. Okay, so I guess this is the danger of going last, right? So how long do you want the presentation to be? Yeah.
Thank you very much. No.
Yeah. See ya. Half hour. Okay. So, so again, my name's Ed Hild. I'm a collaboration architect at the MTC. I feel this might be a little bit anticlimactic because almost every speaker has mentioned, but wait for SharePoint 2013, all the way up to my presentation. In fact, the bomb of everything as an app now is completely gone. But I will start anyway, and cross your fingers that the wireless holds up for me. If not, I have wired here, which might take a second to switch over. So what I wanted to do first was kind of just introduce you to the new Office, first focusing on the Office client applications, and then kind of graduate that into a quick tour at a high level of some of the major investments on the SharePoint stack. Now, a few caveats to my presentation. One, I'm leveraging Office 365, so that's why I need the internet connectivity. In fact, if you wanted to do this demo yourself when you get home, just go to sharepoint.microsoft.com. You can sign up to be in our beta tenancy and get access to the same types of sites and functionality without having to install anything on your machines. So the other caveat is that if anyone heard the announcement, we recently RTM'd both Office and SharePoint. That announcement came out last week. That means that my beta tenancy is in the process of being upgraded. Right? So if we come across any demo demons, I'll talk to it and we'll move on. But it is beta and it is live stuff that I'm showing you here. So in terms of the new Office, I do have one video. It's not nearly as cool as athletes winning gold medals. And my one video is this, and I'll let it play. It's only like 3 minutes long. There's no audio. I'll just kind of talk to it. Is that because normally when you use the phrase, there's a new version of Office, everybody that's in IT in an organization just runs for cover. Right? Deploying Office is not something that enterprises enjoy doing, right? In the prior releases. In this release, in addition to having your traditional MSI-based deployment of the Office client, which is what most of your organizations are doing today, we're going to allow you to be able to deploy Office as a service. And what this means is you'll be able to go to an endpoint, such as Office 365, log in, and install your bits from there. Now, can anybody tell me about how long it usually takes for, say, your Office Pro install to work currently? Average computer? Half hour, right? You go get coffee, hit the restroom, come back. This video is real time. I haven't edited anything out of it, which is why you even saw the login error in the beginning. From beginning to end, this video is 3 minutes long. And what's actually happening here, the reason you see the orange screen there, how can we do this, is that the new version of Office has this virtualization stack built into it. This is very similar to any of you who are using AppV in your organizations today, where the application runs, and it runs isolated from the rest of the OS and making very hard changes on the PC that it's running. So right now, the primary virtualization layer has been installed. This next progress bar you see here is going through and connecting Office 365's services in my user account to that Office client that's on the desktop. And the reason that this is important is because Office has the ability to share its settings across multiple devices. So if you look forward, right, a user locked to one desktop as an information worker is not the scenario we're trying to hit. People are going to have lots of different devices, whether they be phone, whether they be tablets, whether they be PCs. And the changes that they make to Office, what files they were working on, what ribbon customizations they may have done, things along those lines need to go with that user as they change devices, because it's going to be too much of a burden to set it up over and over and over again. That's exactly what this service does, and this connection point back to Office 365 is facilitating that. But towards the end of this video, we will be able to launch Word which is just the application I chose first, even though Office is not fully installed. Because not only are we providing this in a virtualization stack, we're streaming those bits to the user. And what that means is that we can allow them to use the basic functionalities of the applications very quickly. And depending upon where they go or which application they launch next, we'll reprioritize the bits that we're sending in the stream. Now, this has a lot of initial benefits. Like I said, soup to nuts here, I think will be 3 minutes before you see Word launch. But it also has benefits downstream later on as well. How long will it take to install a service pack for a user? Well, because we can stream those bits down, we can stream down the updated service pack behind the scenes. Installing a service pack for Office will be as simple as close Word, open it back up again, because the bits will already be there. Right, so here's that Word 2013 launching. Notice the little dialogue in the bottom there. It says it's still installing. Please don't shut down. We're not done yet, but go ahead and work. Impressed? Yes. Because of I appreciate the applause because I like that rock star mentality. But I won't take any questions until lunch, just to kind of keep things moving. So let's go through a tour. Let's talk a little bit about Outlook. Now, Outlook, honestly, this is not usually the way most users see Outlook for the very first time. They see it more like this. And the reason for that is a lot of the applications, you'll see this throughout the stack, try to get the Chrome of the application out of the way, focus on the content. I think Dan, who was up here earlier, said, let's keep all those other things to the side. Let's focus on what the users are trying to get at. And Office takes that to heart as well. Now, I happen to have spent a long time telling people how the benefits of the ribbon are, so I really like docking the ribbon. And I do a lot of filing things into folders, so I like expanding it as well. But has anybody tried to use, say, the Office 2010 on a touch-based device, Windows 7 or along those lines? No. If you're like me, I have tried, and I gave up quickly. My fingers are just way too big, right? Again, these applications are designed for touch, right? So I don't know if you've heard, we've sold out the pre-orders for the Surface tablets that we started taking pre-orders for, I think, yesterday. But these applications need to work very well in that environment. So that's why there is a touch mode. Notice how the ribbon got a lot larger to make things a little bit easier for you. And then the very common actions of reply, delete, and those things kind of got docked off to the sides. You don't have to worry so much about right-click menus and all those types of things. So a few things in Outlook. And I have a few emails that are here. This one here, the email content says, can we meet tomorrow at my office, right? With the address that's there. Notice that that email message across the top has a Bing Maps kind of link and a suggested meetings link. And what this is showing off is apps. You're going to hear an awful lot about apps from us, both from a Windows perspective as well as an Office and SharePoint perspective. And in Outlook, it's kind of interesting because the apps aren't always present. They can decide to show themselves based on the content of the message. So Outlook has looked at the message and seen that there's an address, hence the reason the Bing Maps link showed up. And if I click that, Bing Maps will run. I can go in. It says it found the address. It highlighted it in the body of the email message. And from here, I can do directions and all of those other type of actions. Now, these apps are very different than apps that you might have seen in Office before, which tend to be COM-based add-ins that you have to be administrators to install. Notice these are all web-based. Right? And yes, there is still, for those who are developers, a JavaScript API to talk to the Office client itself to be able to change content and things. This email message here is one of my favorites. Can you send me those customer details you mentioned yesterday? So let's pretend I had a conversation before arriving here. And I told this guy I had this spreadsheet, had all this really great data in it. He certainly asked for it. So I'll go ahead and reply to the message. Notice the in-line reply. Right? Again, very important if you're on a touch-based device not to have a lot of pop-ups. I say, sure thing. By the way, I'm waiting for the app that tells you that you didn't send the attachment you said you were going to send. Right? But if I move off of it and don't actually send the message, this will refresh. Notice it tells you have a draft right there in the conversation. Right? So you don't have to go and find some hidden drafts folder to remember where those messages are. But I'll go ahead and add that attachment. And I have this attachment on my desktop like all good users. So it's my Northwind customer data. When I add this, can you see the little policy tip that's coming up here in the top corner? Right? And in fact, if I click send, this message won't allow me to actually send the message. And the reason is this is a new feature of Exchange behind the scenes, we've written some policies in the manner of data loss protection. There's certain types of information we don't want to be sent outside the organization. So the fact it's not in the body of my message, it's in that attachment, there are credit card numbers. And so it's telling me that if I highlight over the policy tip here, your organization doesn't allow it. You can optionally allow overrides, which then get audited if you do want users to still be able to do the action but want to track it. Interesting stuff? All right. I'm just showing you a little bit of a lot just to keep things on time. Let me go over to my SharePoint site, but to talk about Word first. I'll do one thing in Word and one thing in Excel for you. Go ahead and open up this proposal. Let's go ahead and open it up in the Word client. Now, the Word client, people have looked at traditionally as a creation device. Word is the tool that I use to go and edit documents. It's not the first tool that would come to mind as a reader or as a consumption-based device. It's kind of hard to tell in this resolution because it's all the way down to 1024 but 768. But notice how the scrolling is kind of off to the side. And if I was on a wider resolution like a tablet, you'd be able to see the first and second page side by side, and you'd swipe left to right to be able to scroll through it. Right? So this reading view of Word has been optimized for that type of experience. Let's go ahead and edit the file. A few things are going to happen very quickly. And you know what? I think my tendency is caused me a slight issue. So the reason is because they upgraded the tendency, they must have thrown away some of my settings. Word will actually remember where you were editing last. And when you go back to that document again, it pops up and says, hey, I thought you were on page 6. Do you want to go there? I had done that yesterday, but the upgrade of that tendency must have thrown that away. I have a comment in this document, which I normally jump right to on that page. Let's go down and find it. See the comments there? Anybody use comments in Word today? How many people like that experience? Right? Eventually, if you have a lot of users working on it, there's so many comments that it becomes almost unreadable, the content you're working with. Would you agree? All right. So notice how the comments now are kind of off to the side, and if I click on it, I can expand it. This is Robin asking me for, hey, some PDF data needs to go here. This is what I think is the cool part of this, the fact that I can reply to the comment and have almost a threaded discussion with inside of it.
How well does it print though on paper?
The comments themselves, there's another view that you want to expand them. So let's kind of follow through with that, right? They're asking me to go get some data out of a PDF. Now, I remember Dan saying some things about PDFs themselves. But if any of you tried to do this, open up a PDF in Acrobat Reader, say maybe it's this table I want in that document, copy, paste. You agree it's not going to work, right? It saves me a few clicks because honestly, I can't remember how to copy and paste in Adobe. Right. So instead of doing it this way, what I'll do is go into Word, go up to File, choose Open, right? Go to my desktop, which is where I had that PDF file, and I will open the PDF file in Word. Right? Now, of course, at this point, I can scroll down, or actually in this case, scroll across, find my paragraph. You believe me that I can copy and paste out of Word, right? So Word for a while has been able to save as PDFs. This is the other half of that story, being able to open as PDFs. Right? Now, I know we're in DC, so there should be a federal presence here. A lot of my federal customers, when I showed them this, the IT people go nuts. They're like, wow, you mean we can get rid of Adobe Acrobat Reader on desktops? Mainly because of the security concerns in terms of how many updates that product gets pushed out. For basic scenarios like this, in terms of basic content creation, because of course I could paste this into Word and still save back as a PDF, it's certainly going to fit in well. Also add to the fact that Windows 8 has a built-in reader application already. And you can see for a large portion of those users, you very well may be able to remove that. I don't think it replaces Adobe's higher-end tools for very high-end scenarios, but the basics certainly are definitely within reach. So let's move out of Word. I have one Excel demo, and then I'll get to SharePoint. And yes, there are new advancements in PowerPoint, all of that. I'm just trying to pick time. So have any of you spreadsheet people in the room? okay? So this scenario hopefully hits a little bit home for you. So you copy-pasted data out of some report or out of some web page, and you ended up with a spreadsheet that looks like this, right? What's the problem with the spreadsheet? It's really that column B has several fields of data within it. So if I wanted to do reports based on department or person or anything like that, it would be kind of tough. So your average user at this point goes out to Bing, right, and does a search looking for the substring function of Excel. Maybe not Bing in that story, but you buy into the substring function. Right? So notice it's not too much data. As a user, I probably just start hand jamming this, right? Events. Can you see that guessed for me what I was trying to do? And the same thing would be true if I was typing John and then went Jenny. I just press the down arrow, I get all of them for me. So this is a feature of Excel called flash fill. Right? And it does concatenations as well. So if you really wanted something like John 1303, which is the end and the beginning, well, then I went down and started typing Jenny 1304. It would fill in and give me that concatenation as well. That's pretty exciting. Not as cool as this, frankly. And that is that this data, I might want to visualize it some way. And instead of having to play around with the ribbon and figure out what I want to do with it, there's this nice little pop-up here that gives you the very common actions that you would do. So if I wanted to format it, notice I can preview what that would look like without having to do a lot of work. If I click on charts, users today who run the chart dialog get an incredible amount of options. What we're doing here is looking at the data that you've highlighted and recommending the charts that we think best show it. Right? So you don't have to guess. My personal pet peeve, something that I'm terrible at, is creating pivot tables. Can never quite get that wizard to run right to give me the right options that I want. So this is my favorite one, is that if I highlight over it, I can see that one would sum it up by department, that one would sum it up by person. That's really the one I want, click it, and now I got that pivot table. So I thought you said there were Excel people in the room. Usually that gets somebody pause. Thank you. But let's go back. Let's go to SharePoint, right? So that's your primary reason you're here. And I'm going to start out on the area formerly known as your My Site. So more personal sites now than My Sites. And the reason My Sites are a bit confusing, especially in SharePoint 2010, is they serve a lot of different roles. It's the place where you have your own personal storage. It's the place where people kind of see your profile. It's also kind of a personal dashboard. And it's a lot of goodness all rolled into one, but became very confusing for users. So what we've done in this release is we've broken that out a bit. So because I'm in Office 365, I also have some Exchange options here. But the ones that are SharePoint specific are really my news feed, my SkyDrive, which we'll talk about, and sites. So the news feed is the central point where all of that social functionality is highlighted. And this is much more social capability than we ever had in the previous release. If there's any one piece of SharePoint at all that received more new functionality than anywhere else, it's definitely in the social stack. Right? So these are news feeds. What I like to point out is that news feeds is not necessarily Twitter feeds and microblogging for the world. It can be that. You can share with everyone and go in and say, hey, I'm going to lunch. Who's in? Probably not all that useful. Notice that if I click on the drop-down here, I can not only say that I want to share with everyone, but I want to share with particular teams. And these teams, they also equate to sites where those groups are working together. So the news feeds themselves can be very enterprise broadcast-oriented, but also localized into an individual group. What's nice about that, though, is that I don't have to browse the 15 different SharePoint sites that I'm a member of to get all of those feeds. They all roll up here on the home page for me. Right? So for example, this feed that you see here comes from the London launch event. If I drop right into that site, right, that's the local news feed. In terms of the feeds themselves, because people kind of always ask, if I type the app sign, right, this works just like you would expect it to work for end users. I'm going to get a list first of people who are kind of like my colleagues, which we now call people I'm following. If I don't want to pick a name on that list and I just start typing for like Sarah, it'll automatically go through the gal and find that person as well. Hashtags, right? Anybody Twitter users? I saw some people on them in the crowd when I was going through. Hashtags for me are like the mind-boggling thing, because I have to spend like a half hour searching in order to find what the hashtag is that I should be using for my stuff. No one else has that problem, right? But if I do a hashtag here and I start typing upcoming events, that's coming from SharePoint's term stores, right? Which can include not only the terms that users are entering kind of in that folksonomy, but also the enterprise taxonomy terms. So you have a much more kind of control or enterprise reach into that vocabulary of the tags. In the prior version of SharePoint, there were lots of different actions that kind of all meant the same thing. You wanted to be updated about something, right? You signed up for an alert on a file, right? But you followed a colleague, right? And and you followed a term, and there was just kind of a lot of linguistic kind of oddities to that. That's been streamlined here, so everything you follow sites, you follow people, you follow terms, and all of that rolls up directly here. Notice that you can also see trending. Now, I don't have a lot of users using my stuff, so you don't see trending tags and trending sites, but there's an analytics engine that is new to SharePoint 2013 that's keeping track of how your users are using this platform and making recommendations, right? You're following these 3 tags. You might also need to be following these 2 based on that fact. If I go into sites, let's talk about SkyDrive first. So SkyDrive in SharePoint, pause for emphasis, right? The name SkyDrive is actually associated also with Microsoft's cloud storage platform, right? Which public service, right? Anybody can go up and sign up for it. This is not that. In fact, the linguistics of this is we refer to this as SkyDrive Pro. This is still your your private document and your shared document library of SharePoint. It's not backed by SkyDrive. But for users, that distinction is not really kind of lost on them. So what we're trying to do is simplify it, right? SkyDrive and SkyDrive Pro. SkyDrive Pro is within your enterprise. SkyDrive is outside, right? And yes, I can sync it, right? So just like the public SkyDrive service, I can sync this locally. And I can do it for other libraries too, not just the one that's in my personal site. But that's all of that content available locally. So if I'm offline, I still have access to my content. Now, just in the SkyDrive that's here, instead of having those 2 different libraries, we just have a folder. Hey, this is shared with everyone. This is stuff that's private for you. And if you pull up any SharePoint 2010 site and pick your average user and stick them in front of them and say, what are the permissions of these files? Which ones are just yours and which ones are shared with other people? They'll have no idea. Would you agree? Yeah. Notice here, it's much easier. If it has a lock icon, it's just for you. Right? If it has a person icon, it's shared. Who's it shared with? Just hover over the icon. Right? That one's shared with everyone. This one's shared with a few people, including Katie Jordan. You want to add somebody else? You shouldn't have to go through those administrative screens of item permissions and breaking inheritance and going through all of that dialogue, because for users, it's really simple, right? I want somebody else to have access to this content. Well, give us your name or email address, and we'll boil it down to, do you want them to be able to view it or edit it? Really simple stuff, right? And also, this requires sign-in. This is an option in my tenancy because since I'm in the cloud, I also allow non-authenticated users into my environment. So kind of an anonymous sharing, which gives you just a unique URL for a period of time. That doesn't translate into a lot of federal agencies today, but I have it turned on in my tenancy, which is why you see that option there. So all they have to do is fill out this simple form. Now, those of you who are admins, yes, all of those advanced dialogues are still there. Right? To Dan's point, this is more about usability for this dialogue. So, and then lastly, sites. The idea behind sites is this is the sites that you're following. They're ones that you're actively engaged in. If I scroll down here, right, there's a whole list of them. But instead of that, let's search real quick. Search is new. Those of you who might have deployed SharePoint 2010 may have had to make a decision between fast search and SharePoint's enterprise search. There is no such decision in this release. There's only one search engine. It is SharePoint, but it has a lot of fast capability. Right? So the enterprise scale, the entity extraction, all those things you associate with fast search engine do come to this search engine. I like the user experience. So if you hover over a result, you can't quite get it on the resolution. You don't just get thumbnails, you'll get full views. They're really tiny on the right-hand side. But the Office web apps get surfaced in the search results. You can go through the slide decks themselves, and it even navigates up. These are the major slides within that presentation. Or if I hover over the Word document, those are the major sections of that file. So I could do really quick one-click dive right into the Word app right at that point of the file. Go back here. Let's play with this last site. So just a few things, just because of time. So this is a site that I've been playing around with. It doesn't normally start with the dialog you see on the left. It actually starts here. When people create new team sites, you see this big set of icons across the top. And this is to help users get started. I noticed in Dan's screen from the Olympics stuff, there was a lot of instructions, and it was very kind of plain. That can be very kind of both underwhelming and overwhelming at the same time for users as, all right, I now have a site. How do I get it to do what I need it to do? So this dialog here is here temporarily to kind of help. Do you need to share your site with somebody? Are you working towards a deadline? If you say yes, it'll start adding some of the task lists and things for it and help you through that. Do you need to add some applications to it? Right. And applications, again, my punchline was kind of stolen. Everything is referred to as an app. Some apps you can add more than once, like libraries. Other apps you may only add once. Like if you wanted, Facebook has an app that you can add so that people can like things using their Facebook credentials. So there's both apps that exist in an app store, and that app store can be one that we have, right, where you expect your partners, such as Bamboo and things, to be able to publish out applications for everybody. But you can also run your own enterprise app store. All it is a site collection based on a particular template. So you don't have to publish things to our app store in order to get them into your SharePoint space. So I have two things to get the wow factor for you because of time. And the resolution is going to make this really interesting. So here's my library. Here's my file. I want to get my file on into the library. You drag and drop to pull it over. Thank you. And then one of the apps that I like a lot is the Team Mailbox app, which Dan highlighted. It's referred to as Site Mailbox in this slide. And the reason this is an actual Exchange mailbox that gets created when you add the app. And the problem is email and SharePoint documents, right, the users are trying to collaborate together, but the data that they're working with is siloed. I'm either in Exchange, in Outlook using email, or I'm in SharePoint using documents. It's really kind of hard to bring those together. So this is a dedicated mailbox for that team where they could see email messages. And I'm not so happy with it from a SharePoint interface perspective, but look at it from an Outlook perspective. The fact that I'm a member of that team site and the mailbox app was added to it, that London launch event team site shows up automatically. There's nothing I have to do in the Outlook interface. So I could see the email messages that are part of that team. But how many times do you run into a scenario where it's not an email message you're trying to send the team? Somebody sent you an attachment, and it's the attachment you want to share with the team. And ideally, in this case, the document shouldn't end up in the mailbox of the site. It should end up in the document library of the site. Agree? All right? So you also can see all of the document libraries here. And yes, you can click on the attachment, drag it over, put it in the document library. It'll take a little while for it to send and receive because it's quite a large file and not such great wireless internet access. But if you trust me, at the end of that send and receive, the file will end up in the SharePoint document library of the site.
Was that a cut and paste?
Drag and drop. I didn't copy and paste. Can I do 3 more minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. I want to spend a little bit with just because of the project management conversation you had earlier. I did say I was working on a deadline. Project management for Microsoft's been one of those unique things. First, I do not consider myself an EPM guy or a project server guy. I have none of those credentials. Because to me, project management is much more about process. It's not about the tool. Right? And I struggle with that part of it. But what I have found just talking to customers is that project management, right, is a lot of things to different organizations. And as Microsoft, we really only had kind of 2 solutions. There was Project Server, the very big hammer, right, and then SharePoint task lists. and a wide gap in between, right? And most of what people want to do is in that in between. They don't need project server, but the SharePoint task list doesn't quite cut it. So I've added the lightweight project management functionality that's new to SharePoint onto this site. And I defined a few tasks. Notice I already get this nice timeline across the site that's giving me an idea of when each task is due. But just to show you a little bit more, if I go into the tasks list that's here, right, I can go in and see the tasks that are there. Notice that there are subtasks, right, which is a big deal. The registration and launch is after deliver event. And I could do some simple things here, such as editing new tasks and that. But one thing it doesn't do by itself is the idea that if I adjust a timeline for one particular task, well, for that resource, it might have a rippling effect, correct? Right? Because in SharePoint, still, each of these are individual task items. It doesn't have that logic to say, well, if this gets changed, I might have to cascade those others. But there's a product that does have all of that robustness to it, right? It's project, right? So I could get the end result of that. So if I go into my task list here, I could say open up the task list in project. This will synchronize down the task list that's part of that site. And now I can go in and do all of those advanced assignments, resource management, and things in project till I get the tasks to be exactly what I want them to be with the correct due dates, and it will synchronize back to the SharePoint site. So I can go in and look at, of course, resource usage based on different people. I can see my timelines, right, and go through really just all the different views that project provides. So there is, this is kind of that middle ground. It's not necessarily project server, but it's project plus the SharePoint task lists themselves, because this has those extra visualizations and other algorithms that the SharePoint task list by itself does not have. All right. So like I said, that is a whirlwind tour. A few other things that are just worth mentioning. There's a whole new EDiscovery functionality that unifies EDiscovery across our platform. So we did a lot of work for records management in SharePoint 2010, but EDiscovery was kind of still weak. How do you go find the content you want to place on hold? So in SharePoint 2013, you can go in, there's a new site called an EDiscovery site, and you do your queries. And from one place, you can query SharePoint and Exchange, find all the content that you want to place on hold, and even build exports of those packages to hand them over as part of audits or into a discovery phase. There's also a whole new branding engine that's to this, both a lightweight branding engine as well as a high-end one. So the comment Dan made about every piece of work you do in brand you end up throwing away between releases, I will say now with this release, you'll be able to build your brand in whatever tool you want that's not SharePoint specific. Dreamweaver, Expression Web, Notepad, whatever you want to use to build your brand, independent of SharePoint. You drag in your just regular old HTML files and style sheets, this thing will build the master page for you. Right? And then all a developer has to do is tweak where they want the content editor parts of the page to be. So I have all that kind of stuff, but I know we're kind of out of time. Hopefully you liked a little bit of what you saw. Yeah? The SharePoint conference is the coming out party, right? I would bet that the keynote of that will have a lot of demo similar to this, but they'll obviously have a lot more time. So, there you go.
All right, that concludes our speaker portion of the event. Before we break for lunch, Anders Johnson, the chairman and CEO of Bamboo, is going to have some closing remarks, and we'll move on from there. Thank you.
Okay, that was great. We hope that you have found our leadership forum very informative, and that you had a chance to meet with, talk to other people who, like you, believe that SharePoint holds a great promise for enterprise business solutions. In addition to the overarching theme of collaboration, one of our major themes here today was the SharePoint journey. We think that having others along the way to help can make any journey more rewarding and less challenging. When it comes to SharePoint, I'm happy to say that you're not alone. Thousands of pioneers worldwide have explored uncharted territory with SharePoint, and you have heard from some of the most respected of them today. Nothing excites me more than helping customers advance on the journey from configuring basic team sites to deploying enterprise-level project management, knowledge management, and even CRM applications on top of the SharePoint foundation. In my many years in the technology market, I've never seen a platform with more potential to transform global business. In today's world, successful companies must react immediately. SharePoint provides that potential by allowing millions of knowledge workers to collaborate instantly and by supporting the rapid deployment of powerful business line applications. You might even say that the SharePoint movement is really an independence movement, since it frees organizations from major cost and programming effort associated with legacy enterprise content management. At Bamboo, we began our SharePoint journey as a web part vendor. Many years and thousands of customers later, Bamboo is here to offer you much more than just web parts and applications. We are here to offer you a collective guidance to clearly mark the signpost on the road to SharePoint independence. This is more than just a promise. This is the Bamboo way. Before we go, I'd like to thank all of our partners who made this happen by joining us to speak at our inaugural SharePoint Leadership Forum. We had Bob Manfredi, Mark Miller, Tim Semark, Barry Jinks, Sadie Van Buren, Dan Holm, and Ed Hild. Thank you for helping make the SharePoint Leadership Forum a real success. And to our gracious audience, an extra token of thanks for your attendance. We'd like to present with you a gift to underscore our commitment to making SharePoint the platform for enterprise collaboration and content management. Please be sure to pick up your envelope in the back here when you exit the room. Thank you.